afternoon. I'm Gary Wiggins. I work for AT&T. Spend most of my time in the eastern part of the country working property tax issues. You know, this would be kind of a contrast after Ian. One, he sounds real smart. I'm not nearly that smart. Two British guys, they always sound smart whether they are or not. And I sound like a hick from Missouri, which is what I am. So what I tell everybody all the time when they ask me anything, I'm just doing the best I can. So that's what I'll do. I'm going to run it through some stuff here from an AT&T perspective. Everything up here is kind of from AT&T. There's a little bit of industry stuff, but not much. And if I have something different than Ian, don't ask me why. Somebody told me, and that's what I put up. And I do have something different than Ian, probably. What's going on with AT&T? We just turned down the 2G network. A lot of it's still sitting out there, but as of January 1, it was turned down and no longer working, right? So what does that mean? A lot of machine-to-machine traffic now is probably not working anymore. And, you know, I think we told people it wasn't going to work, but I think some didn't believe us. But it's probably not working. The other important thing is, as we look at 3G now, its percentage of data traffic is kind of falling as a percentage of the total, like a rock. You know, we see the end in sight for 3G as well. By 2020 timeframe, it'll be turned down. But the amount of traffic traveling on it will be a whole lot less as a percentage of the total shortly. It's not very big right now. Deterioration of the wireless business. Yeah, this is going to be a sob story for AT&T and Verizon, right? The two largest carriers, AT&T and Verizon, have had to look for growth elsewhere. Why? Because it's saturated. That's why we bought other things, right? That's why we're buying Time Warner. There's not enough growth in revenue and profitability to survive on just making a wireless connection, or wireline connection for that matter. And so where everybody used to think of wireless as a good growth business, it's not so much growth unless you find another way to grow. Consistent erosion in the wireless market prompted AT&T to move aggressively to media and advertising. Craig Moffett, who likes to beat the hell out of telecom, right? He says there's no next big thing in telecom, and we're running for the exits, right, to try to find something else that will provide some growth. Ian mentioned declining ARPUs. This kind of tells what ARPUs are really doing and how they are declining pretty significantly. So if you're sitting there with this idea that average revenue rate per minute's fallen pretty rapidly, and you have this demand to put more and more bandwidth over your network to satisfy your customers, it's not a pretty equation, right? It's just going to get worse and worse. Here's other graphs by carrier that show that same declining ARPU. So it helps explain why we're buying things, right? The whole thing is that, you know, that natural growth that was there for a long time is no longer there because everybody's got a cell phone, everybody's got a smartphone. It's why we bought DirecTV. We bought DirecTV with the idea of putting all that content over wireless phones. We put it over wireless phones, but the wireless business has continued to decline since the DirecTV deal closed. As you losing a shocking 1.4 million of postpaid phone subscribers. So, you know, postpaid ARPU is declining, and it doesn't look like that's going to change. So yeah, basically the comment is, would AT&T normally buy something as big as Time Warner after buying DirecTV a short time ago and spending lots and lots of money? Well, if that's still happening to your revenues, maybe. And that's the suggestion as to why we did it or why we're doing it. If you look at current performance, third quarter earnings report, business solutions fell 0.4%, videos down 0.5%, broadband's down 1%, and even consumer mobility is down 5.9%. So, again, it doesn't look that good, right? if you're at AT&T, the big news is everything is moving to software, right? And software-defined networks are supposed to be one of our saviors because it's supposed to allow us to drive costs down enough that maybe we can make money with that much smaller revenue stream. So the goal is to virtualize 75% of the network by 2020 and run those functions on white box computers. If you go in an edge core switching office in wireless, you won't find any LTE equipment in there. There isn't any. Where is it? It's in a data center, and that data center is not even close by. So this idea that we're going to virtualize the network at the end of 2015, we'd virtualized 5.7% of the network. At the end of 16, we're up to 34%. Next year's target is like 50%, and we move on from there. The advantages, again, reduce cost and operating efficiency, allow the customers to have more flexibility than they've had up to now. Acquisitions, right? I talked about DirecTV. The whole idea of that was find a way to grow. And, we bought DirecTV, and we have all this capability now, right? NFL Sunday Ticket. How many people have NFL Sunday Ticket? Anybody? Yeah, and you're an AT&T employee, and you get it for free, What that tells you is if you give it away, somebody will take it. But not many people pay for it. You can get. I have DirecTV too. I also get it for free. You ever try to you can put up 6 games at once on your TV screen? You ever try to watch 6 games at once? I gave up trying to watch 6 games, so I put up the other screen that had 4. At the end of the first half, or about what was the first half, I was exhausted. I was trying to track this stuff, go back and forth, and I said, I'll never do that again. So this year, last year was all about DirecTV and moved to Latin America. We bought Usacell, we bought Nextel Mobile, and now this year we're going to buy Time Warner. It's $85.4 billion in equity, $8 billion in total. And it's supposed to be accretive right out of the box, right? So it's going to help us cover these revenue and dividend shortfalls. So at least for a short term, it's going to help us buy a problem. And again, the idea is put all that stuff over any kind of medium the customer wants to watch. So again, big focus on cell phones, and you can watch anything, do anything on a cell phone. The idea again is, and grow, become a media giant and grow. If you can picture this, right? Any of you guys seen Randall Stevenson? He's the chairman of AT&T. Probably not a lot of you. He's now reputed to be a Hollywood media mogul. He's the most unlikely looking mogul you could ever see. Internet of Things. Ian talked a lot about the Internet of Things. AT&T thinks we'll be big in Internet of Things, but Ian also said something important. You don't make any money on Internet of Things. AT&T expects 50 billion things or connected apps and hardware by 2020. That's a lot. In 2016, we signed over 500 new Internet of Things deals in the U.S. and globally. We've got 300 million connected devices on our network. This autonomous driving in cars is a big focus of AT&T. We brag about we've got more cars than anybody. We've got 10 million cars in 22 of the top global brands. And then we've got Digital Life, which is the greatest imposition into your home you could ever imagine. We put TV cameras everywhere. We can monitor your garage doors. We can monitor for water leaks. We can do anything and everything. I just thank God I wasn't a kid whenever, or they didn't have that when I was a kid. I'd have been in a lot of trouble. 5G's coming and shortening 3G and 4G life cycles. I'm a little confused after listening to Ian because we're telling the world that we're rolling out 5G this year, right? And it won't be the mobile 5G, but point-to-point 5G, we're rolling it out. By the way, we're rolling it out right here in Austin right now. So I don't know. Ian left me scratching my head a bit. And we talk 5G as being amazing, right? Speeds of up to 14 gigs a second, at least in the lab. Even LTE, as Ian was talking about, we got some pretty tremendous speeds over LTE right now. With carrier aggregation, put up three different bands, put it together, we can do a gig. We can do a gig on LTE in the real world. Just recently we were talking about Google Fiber, and that the miracle of a gig was something no one really had a use for, but we're doing it wirelessly, and so will everybody else be. Yeah, this is what I just spoke to. I should have waited for the slide. Speeds up to a gig in 17, on download, upload up to 500 megabits. It's made possible with carrier aggregation, putting all that stuff together. More competition every year. We put Google up, and Google's doing all these things. Well, they're doing more things, Project F5, Project Loon, Project Titan. But the real behemoth that's coming is right there. That cold, hard woman. Comcast. When she left AT&T to go run Comcast Property Tax Group, on her way out the door, she turned and glared at us, and she said, "I will bury you." I'll be damned, I guess she is.
We'd be happy to partner with you, though.
Yeah, the analysts are saying cable will have 10% of the wireless market by 2020. They'll probably have 25%. And so Comcast plans to join the wireless market this year, leveraging its network. They got 15, now they're saying 15 million Wi-Fi spots. They were saying 10 million not all that long ago, right? So between the Wi-Fi and there being a virtual network operator selling Verizon's network, thanks a lot, Verizon, they're going to eat our lunch here pretty quick. And then we got Charter, they're kind of doing the same thing. They say that by 2020 they'll capture 23 million wireless customers. And here's the bad part. If you work for AT&T, Verizon, those are the customers they're going to take. They say that T-Mobile and Sprint, they're actually pretty insulated and may benefit from the increased competition. I don't know how they're pulling that off, but that's what these heavy analysts say. And, the analysts say cable will win. Craig Moffett, he's not high. In the end, what he says with the cable companies coming in, he says that leaves about 4 wireless operators. And the existing telcos will only be 1 or maybe 2 of those operators. So look around, you guys. Some of us won't be here very long. This is just more competition from other entrance into the wireless market. No point in going into it in detail. And, I have to remember I am a property tax guy, right? And so I got to argue about the value of all these widgets that are sitting out there. These show pricing trends for equipment. And, we get people actually wanting to positively trend stuff up. The trends are negative, guys, so we ought to recognize that. This is just more price curves. Anyway, thank you very much.
You mentioned a couple things, and one, I will say that we have seen darker days in the past. You tried to acquire us. Those were very dark days, right?
I would have thought that was a very light day for you.
It has changed over time. We've come back, and Gary and I were joking last night, and I says, I must have been off my rocker, or maybe I'm off my rocker, and maybe I've always been off my rocker.
Yep.
Right? And when we talk about those things being off the rocker, I want to continue one of the themes from last year. Somebody accused me of smoking a couple years ago, so I decided to bring a little pot from Washington down last year. And I'm going to step that up one this year. Because this video that I'm going to introduce, I want to make sure you guys
Did you bring cocaine this year or what?
That's a good question. I'm one of symbolism, so what I did do is I brought you an edible. Don't eat the whole cookie, okay? You only need a little bit of it, right? But I want you guys to enjoy while we watch this video. So,
the world changes fast. From the very beginning, we built our network for the future of wireless. Just imagine how we'll be able to harness technology to make it work for people. It's what you need, the split second you need it. It's so seamless, the technology disappears,
You know what I do? It's literally
erasing language barriers as we speak. And getting the detailed information you need in real time. Blurring the lines between virtual and reality.
Ben?
Gabrielle?
Yeah, didn't I meet you at that event last
We
week?
built our network to make the future possible. 5G is coming. And with it, innovation that makes our lives simpler and seems inevitable, yet essential the second we experience it. And things you never thought possible become the new normal. When the future becomes reality, we'll be right there with you, so you can stay connected to what matters most. And experiencing the things you care about becomes more meaningful than you ever imagined. Because the future of wireless is about the actual moment, in the moment, wherever you are, wherever you want to be. The Un-carrier will keep building the future for you, one technology first at a time, and we won't stop.
What about people over 25 years old?
exactly. So this was just T-Mobile's take on a 5G future with some of the possibilities. I'm not going to go into details on that, but we put this out last fall. Neville, our chief technology officer, delivered this. We got a great leadership team. Neville, John, Mike, Braxton, they're always out there pushing the envelope. And this is just one of those things to deliver what the future could be. So last year we talked about Binge On, which was one of the initiatives that was out there. And from last year to this year, right, I want to introduce you to what we call the Un-carrier Next. This was recently released from T-Mobile, and we are again trying to break the rules of wireless, right? We're trying to become the new wireless company, and we're trying to disassociate ourselves from AT&T and Verizon and our other competitor, Sprint. As we look at what the future brings. And Un-carrier Next was released at CES a little while back. What does it do? We're breaking the rules of wireless. Okay, one of the major issues that's out there, what you see is what you pay. Taxes and fees are included. So you're going to have a flat fee. Some of the other rules that are out there, you shouldn't have to pay for what you don't use, right? We've got a kickback. Yeah, it's a dirty word, but we do use it, and we are kicking back money to you if you're not a heavy user. Only you should have the power to change what you pay. So your bill will be locked in indefinitely on Un-carrier Next. It's not going to change. And the mobile internet shouldn't be sold by bits and bytes. When we talk about these data packages, right, the internet was never made to be sold by bits and bytes. It was supposed to be unlimited. All traffic is going from the mobile to the phone, right? And all phone is, going to mobile, right? So it is the mobile internet. And, I should say what the F, I'll leave it at that. I'll let you interpret it. So what the fee, right? This is one of the things off of our website looking at competition and how that we are focusing going forward of the all-in. And sorry, Gary, but this is an AT&T comparison. And we're $160 all in for 4 lines, right? So if you have a family of 4, that's $160 a month, all taxes and fees included. It's that rate every month. It will never change. And you can look through some of the fees, right? The access fee, the administrative fee, say what, right? The regulatory charge for real. Federal Universal Service Charge, yep, it's covered, right? On and on and on. And so that's what we're trying to do is figure out how to make it simple for the customer. And we're going after the customer in a simple way, in a transparent way. We are at 72 million customers now, and we're continuing to grow. I'm going to jump from our current marketing to some of our network stats. Look at some, and this is just a couple of the high-level stats to give you a feel for where T-Mobile has been and where we're at currently. We've got about 313 million pops covered on LTE. By the end of this year, we're only looking to increase that by another 7 million, right? So we've got most of the country covered now, and that's by the end of 2017. Ian also mentioned this earlier, low-band spectrum, 700 megahertz. AT&T kindly gave us some spectrum and a pot of money when that acquisition didn't go through, and we turned around and bought some low-band spectrum from Verizon, so thank you very much, Verizon. We've been putting it to good use. We're trying to create a competitive advantage. We now have 250 million pops covered on low-band 700 megahertz spectrum. For the last 12 quarters, we've had the fastest LTE network out there. And then when we talk about transitioning from one network to another, we have 64% of our voice traffic is over VoLTE, or voice over LTE. We believe that is a global leading stat. So we are pushing the limits of technology from a T-Mobile perspective. We're not going to wait. We're going to try to roll it out as fast as we can. Sometimes that comes with a little glitches, but we're not going to stop, with that pedal to the metal, so to speak. Some of the other items that are out there, 90% of our data is on LTE right now. So we talk about this 3G or HSPA plus network that's out there. That is quickly dwindling, right? Most of the traffic carried is over LTE. And we talked about that earlier. You heard it's all about video. 70% of our spectrum has been refarmed to LTE. And our 2G network, we're going to keep it in place through 2020. But I want to clarify that. It's not a 2G network. So if you go back and look at the old BTS boxes that are sitting on the ground in the original 2G network, that's not what it is. All we're doing is putting a little card in our LTE eNode B and keeping up, right, the characteristics from a software perspective on a 2G or GSM network. And the reason we're doing that is because my competitor here decided to shut down, and all those M2M customers that are out there, we're using that and we're running it on a very thin layer. So when I say a thin layer, we're using about 1 megahertz, maybe 1.3 megahertz of spectrum to keep that 2G network up and running, and then it's only got a little card that's sitting in at each cell site. So it's not the old big radios that had minimal traffic that's out there. All that has been shut down. So that's the way that we're focusing on it from a 2G network. And that plays also into the 3G, which Gary mentioned. The traffic on the 3G is also dwindling, and so we're looking at, what the end of life is on 3G also as 5G quickly approaches. And then the last topic that I wanted to bring up on the network stats is the 600 megahertz auction, right? I got a question mark here for March 2017. Is that going to end soon? This next slide is a little more detail on that, and I just wanted to show you some of the changes in the characteristics. This happened to come from one of the investment bankers out there. Because it's still a quiet period, I'm not going to say much about it since we are one of those carriers. But from an investment banking perspective, this is probably one of the deals of the century, considering the amount of money that was paid right on the last auction that was mid-band spectrum. And so we think we're in a very good position. We are an active participant. We've stated to the market that we are going to bid aggressively, and the results of that auction should be known mid to late March, maybe early April at the latest. But in the next few weeks, it should wrap up. The key here that you've heard earlier in the day, it started off from a reverse from a broadcaster spectrum at $86 billion. That's what they wanted for it. The carriers that were in the bidding process bid $22 billion. It went to 54, 21, 40, 19, and this last round shocked everybody when it came out at $10 billion. And everybody's going, "What happened?" And did the carriers not show up? Well, T-Mobile's at the table, and we're going to participate. So the details will be known later. Gary talked about the gigabit and LTE advanced, and I'm a finance guy, so I'm not a techie, but I'm going to try to explain it the best I can from T-Mobile's perspective and what little that I know on the technical side. So this is just a quick overview. We start with 3 carrier aggregation, so we're looking at different spectrum positions, right? And when we talk about each carrier, we're focusing on a 5 megahertz carrier. Okay, and a 5 megahertz carrier will carry traffic at about 35 to 38 megabits per second. To that, we add current technology or 256 QAM technology, and that will get you up to 50 megabits per second. And there's some details down there below what QAM is. I'm not going to go into the description for you. And from there, we add what we call MIMO, multiple input, multiple output, right, or 4x4 technology, and that'll get you to basically 100 megabits per second. And when we're there, and then we say, okay, now we want to take those 5 megahertz carriers and we're going to add it by 10, so we're going to use 50 megahertz of download, right, and that will get you to about 1,000 megabits per second, or 50 megahertz of download will get you to about a gigabit per second speeds, right? And that's what we're testing now. There's some qualifications around that, and we're going to continue to enhance that. That's what we have on the licensed spectrum. Does every market we have 50 megahertz of download spectrum? No, it doesn't. So we're working on that. We're an active participant in LAA, or license assisted access, right? And you've heard some of the details around that earlier. The 3.5 gigahertz, the 5.5 gigahertz spectrum, right, for Wi-Fi and offloading, that's unlicensed spectrum. I believe there's over 500 megahertz of available spectrum in the 5 gigahertz band to utilize, and we're gonna participate in that. But this is something that's happening today. We just released this in 2 different markets. So when you hear this, a few days ago we said, guess what? We've got Washington, D.C. blanketed with this technology today. So what's another thing that's stopping us from getting to these speeds? These things, right? We don't have handsets in the market yet. But, as our CEO, John, predicted, at CES early this year, probably by the end of this year, we'll see close to gigabit speeds in the market, and that's going to be a handset, right? So you figure it out, the holiday season, there'll be new handsets coming, et cetera, within the next 12 to 18 months, that we will have handsets that are able to deliver these speeds. So we did it in Washington, D.C., and I just saw this morning we also released it in another market. So the Super Bowl is coming in a couple weeks, and we've also rolled out this technology at the Super Bowl, right, in the surrounding area. So we are looking to be competitive. We want to make sure we're making a presence, and we're just not stopping. I wanted to throw a couple other slides up here just talking about changes over time. This one is live TV and how it's changing over time and the displacement. When we talk about Netflix, we have free streaming on our service. So if you're not watching live TV, you're most likely streaming on another format, and data is what we're dealing with, and this just looks at some of the changes over time. It was 5 hours, now it's about down to 4 hours. Mobile data, several speakers earlier talked about this. The compound growth, this one happens to be from multiple sources, including Morgan Stanley, but you can see that it represents some other research that was done, right? 40-50% compound average growth over the next few years. And then competition, this gives you some of the history on competition. We had these slides up before. It's not going to increase or decrease anytime soon each year. And then the new one here is T-Mobile One, right? Competition isn't going to slow down. It is fierce, right? We're going to do everything we can to gain the customer, if it's going to be at AT&T's expense or Verizon's expense. And Sprint, I hope you survive from a competitive perspective. But we're out there to compete, and we're going to do it in an aggressive manner. One other comment that I'd like to make before I turn it over is that when we talk about the technology side, I just went through what that looks like to get to a gigabit speed, and there are a lot of things that change from a property equipment standpoint over time. And I'll just give you one example of that. We have antennas, and when we decided to roll out LTE, we weren't as early on LTE as some of the others, but one of our vendors happened to have an integrated antenna. So it had a tower top radio that was baked into the antenna, right? And when we got to change that, okay, now we got to swap all that out, and we got to put a new antenna up there and have the tower top radio as an external component or a modular component that will be baked into the antenna, right? So we can make those changes over time. I mean, that's expensive, it's costly, it's redundant, but that's just one example that we got to climb back up the pole. And there's been some other things on the network too that we've done over time. I'm not an engineer, they probably don't want to hear this, and different carriers may want to chime in on this, but I called it early on the poor man's build, right? Could you get away with LTE by not going up the pole and just keeping everything at the ground and using coax? Some tried that, right, and they realized they couldn't do it, so they had to go back up, run fiber up the pole, right, and get more and more of the software and the electronics closer to the antenna. And so that's a learning process that all the carriers are going through. And so when we talk about changes over time, there are always going to be changes, usually every 2 to 3 years, that we're going to have to go back in and reconfigure the network as we continue to build out. On that note, I will turn it over to Jim, I believe. Or are we going down the road? Okay, perfect.
So I'm Dave Schneider with Ernst & Young, previously with Sprint, now contractor doing the property taxes for Sprint. Appreciate these guys going before me and really enjoyed Ian's talk earlier and really felt he was talking to me on several occasions during his comments, but very enlightening. Want to just give a couple kind of highlights on Sprint, kind of looking at the financial picture and then kind of where the network is right now. Wanted to do just a real quick rear view mirror look. I know Jim's probably got a half hour here, so I'm going to give him some time back here in a minute. But if you think back just a couple years ago, after the proposed merger between Sprint and T-Mo fell apart, Marcelo Clare came in as Sprint's CEO and president as in August of 2014. Since then, his focus has been pretty laser focused on development and execution of a turnaround strategy, for Sprint. So that's what he's been, focused on. Sprint largely completed the network vision, which was kind of rip and replace. Again, Ian kind of used that term earlier, where they, replaced all of their cell site, network assets, a lot of the switch assets as well. That's largely behind the company. That investment was in 2012, 2014 timeframe. So with that as a rearview mirror look, just kind of looking at the financial metrics. Sprint is due to release earnings next week, I believe January 31st. So some of my comments here are going to be based off of their 9/30 results and what things were looking like at that point. I think the results of the network vision are coming to fruition. The postpaid churn rates were the best ever for Sprint, about 1.37% on the postpaid churn. Net op revenues were up, year over year. Company continues to take a lot of strategies and steps toward trying to improve their liquidity position. They've got a lot of debt load, a lot of which is coming due over this year and next. So you've seen a variety of different types of leasing, sale, leaseback types of transactions to help improve the liquidity position. The other thing that Marcelo announced about a year ago was trying to take additional OpEx out of the business and had announced a plan to reduce $2 billion, a sustainable $2 billion reduction. And as we exit 2016, Sprint has a fiscal year 3/31. That plan is still in place. So continuing to take OpEx out of the business, and that will continue on into 2017. The company did adjust upward their guidance for their op income for the year. So another sign that things are beginning to turn around based upon some of the financial metrics. The stock price at the end of 2015 was about $362 a share. At the end of 2016, it was $842. So another sign of kind of things turning. With respect to the wireless network and quality performance, lots of commercials, ads over the last year in terms of different networks improving, what have you. Sprint's network has been widely recognized for the improvements that they have made. These are evaluations by different third-party rating agencies. Sprint recently hired away Paul from used to do the Verizon "Can You Hear Me Now" commercials, and Sprint started using him for their commercials. Again, touting the improvements in the network that have been achieved. A lot of discussion today about the 600 auction. Sprint is the carrier that is not participating in that auction. The feeling being by the company is that they've got fairly deep spectrum holdings and did not have a need to participate in that auction. Sprint did shut down the WiMAX network earlier this year, or in the first quarter of 2016. That had been previously announced, but it had been delayed due to some court injunctions. But that network was shut down end of March of 16. Sprint does have probably more spectrum deployed on LTE per customer than any of the other carriers today. They've got the LTE Plus available in over 250 markets. They have also been deploying the 3-carrier aggregation in several of the markets, including Chicago, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Dallas, Denver, Kansas City, and Cleveland. And they're offering a number of the 3-channel carrier aggregation capable devices today. I think there are about 9 or 10 of those devices currently available. Sprint's strategy, has been, and Ray Hodges kind of mentioned this last year. He spoke on behalf of Sprint last year at this conference. He mentioned the small cell movement. That's really where Sprint is focusing its efforts right now. They've been performing a lot of trials this past year, doing a lot of the permitting to get that in place. And I think as we head into 2017, that's where you're going to see kind of the bulk of their CapEx dedicated to that arena. Sprint owns, I think, 160 megahertz of the 2.5 gigahertz, and that is seen as the foundation for their, and the bedrock of their 5G efforts as we move forward. With respect to densification, there are over 200 small cells that have been put on air in Manhattan, and again, I really expect to see this kind of accelerate as we go into 2017. And with that, I'll give the rest of the time over to Jim.
Hi, I don't know if, it's always a pleasure to be around these guys. It's not so much a pleasure to be around them when they're sitting up here. I don't know if all of you know me or you don't, but my name's Jim Dombrowski. I'm designated state certified general appraiser. I spend about 95% of my typical year in property tax handling the landline side of the business, doing land and buildings, and doing some outside plant stuff. So when you're looking down your best choices to have on this panel representing Verizon wireless issues, I ain't it, as I see it. I listened to Ian with great interest, and I'm going to try to tie back into him when I get to that point. But, to put things in the context of what you're dealing with, he asked you all if how many watched The Crown. Okay, I would ask you how many of you watched Shameless. All right, anybody? Hope so. It's a great show. Anyway, the difference there is, I think, the difference in our presentation. But if you had to choose who to do this, if you were looking for people to be here, the better choice is one is no longer with the company, one is out of the country. Another one who I think would be the expert to be here is doing a lot of compliance and managing the office while the other's out of the company. So that left me as fourth. And my plan for the week was to be in Orlando, otherwise embarrassing myself on the golf course starting today. And I guess I'm doing pretty much the same thing here this afternoon. So that said, I reached out when I got asked to fill in for this and to do the broadband presentation to cover for one of the guys who couldn't be here. I reached out to a guy named Mike Haberman, who's a senior vice president in wireless network engineering. Great guy, knows his business well. He sent me a presentation. He said, you're safe to use this because it's been sent in the public domain, but I don't really have much time to talk to you about it. So I'm using his presentation. I added a couple slides in the end of it because I wanted to tie it back into the question evaluation. So anyway, one thought on the whole Sprint thing and using the old Verizon, can you hear me now, guy? T-Mobile Sprint future commercials, you might want to think that guy from Subway is available. I'm not sure, but hey, another thing to see how many people watch TV. How many of you guys have seen the T-Mobile commercial, I Got Fees? Anybody? It's a great commercial, man. It's got because they're hitting on Verizon like they always do because we're in a ruiniest competition world. But it's I got fleas. And at the end of it, the wife swats the husband in the head, pretending like she's getting his filet, right? And she goes, "Did I get him?" And I'm thinking Verizon should be that wife. But anyway, that said, let me get into what I really wanted to talk to you about, which is Mike Haberman's presentation. Because, you know, I could be on the 15th hole embarrassing myself, so I might as well be doing it here. I'm assuming the one on the right's going to advance things, I hope. Okay, so I'm going to say thank you for having me here before I humiliate myself. And oddly enough, he writes this and he puts that in as his first slide after the title, which I thought was interesting. The point that we would put out there, I think, and Mike wanted to talk about, was that customer demand seems nearly insatiable. Okay, this business and the transition from wireline to wireless and where wireless is going with the 5G world coming is happening very, very fast, and we're all scrambling for this customer demand. The slide that Ian put up, okay, which I hated when he put it up, and then I began to think about it and I loved it. He put up those revenues, and I want you to remember when I get to the end of his revenue slide and the fact it was a 10-year projection that doesn't start to make even a little money until the 5th or 6th year. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about the value side of that. But anyway, if you look at the appetite for bandwidth to support both the wireless industry and broadband, it's basically on statistics compiled by Cisco. It's expected to grow between 2015 and 2020 by 8 times what it is today. Okay, so that's incredible growth and incredible demand for space, incredible demand for more spectrum, incredible demand for the broadband to support the wireless technology out there in 5G. There are key demand drivers that impact this, and obviously one is the video streaming that does it incrementally. Oddly, among them, Netflix, one of our largest customers, part of the whole net neutrality issue and really the need to meter out the use of our network. Multiple devices is incremental growth, and you'll see how that plays into 5G. Obviously, as was mentioned this morning, the 4K television and UHD is an exponential thing, and certainly augmented intelligence, virtual reality is supposed to be an exponential impact as well. So when you look at evolving network use, you have technology progression, okay, which is accelerating innovation in business models. You have a physical and digital integration in the world, which really, if you looked at the web, you're moving really into a 3rd generation web when you begin to talk about the merging of a physical and digital world. You have these hyper giants in internet traffic that have information islands, and they're great users of the spectrum and the space and the broadband that we have available. And then you have things like on-demand networks, virtualization, open space, the next generation mobility, which is going to involve, obviously, machine mobility and autonomous vehicles. And you see Amazon trying it. You see vehicles, whether it's a beer truck, which I really enjoy, or cars on the road. You notice how the beer truck didn't kill anybody, but the car did. But anyway, you're going to have all these devices, and I think it could impact employment. I do differ with that glowing impression of the future in that regard. And I think even when you look at like Amazon, when they're sending out drones to properties, obviously at some point you don't necessarily need to have that FedEx driver pull up to your house, especially if they focus on short haul urban distances. A lot of jobs get eliminated. Maybe it'll be postal workers though, because everybody says that's going away. Anyway, I don't know. But smart data management and traffic optimization and deep analytics are part of this evolving network use. More and more, you hear about, I think last year when I was here, we talked about big data. And obviously, big data's importance just grows every day. You look at some of the acquisitions of the companies right now in the scramble, a lot of it is to acquire spectrum and to acquire dark fiber, to acquire broadband, but a lot of it is also to acquire content and analytics to use the content. Not a lot of it being utilized greatly today as much as it will be in a 5G and 6G environment. So the network point, I guess I should say thank you and just keep flashing that up. The network is evolving rapidly across several fronts at this point. What it requires, and you may have seen this picture before, it really requires an extreme investment on the part of all the players who are going to come out of this as winners. An investment that's already begun but will just rapidly accelerate over the next 5, 7, 10 years in densifying a network to meet the needs and demands of a 5G and then a 6G world. I mean, basically, you got to spend a fortune to move your existing 4G network and whatever else you supported in addition to that to 5G. Because what is 5G dependent upon? It's dependent upon microcells, DAS antennas. It's dependent upon broadband. It's dependent on reducing latency, and it's dependent on security and reliability. And the only way you accomplish that in a wireless world is you shorten the distances between where your nodes are to get back and get into the network. All right, so this is all about densifying a network and making it so that it can support this 5G world we're going to be in. Virtualized network functions. Mike had things about flexible change management 24/7 and being able to utilize the network to the needs of the network, automation and analytics, shared resources, and micro releases. And basically all this is about, as far as I can understand it, as a landline property tax manager, is that it has to do with making more efficient use of what you have now, because you're going to spend an awful lot of money on CapEx to expand beyond what you have now. But at the same time, if you're going to survive out there in this world, you're going to have to become a heck of a lot more efficient with the network that you have and the way you utilize your spectrum and your broadband capability. So end-to-end device integration, we talk about Internet of Things. On the left side of the screen, you see the devices that would go in. You see the Verizon network, which will rely upon a virtualized wireless core network and wired access. And then you see this ThingSpace platform and connectivity management, device management, reporting and analytics, and then security and compliance. And really what you're talking about is zero touch on boarding. You guys got to read sideways for me. I'm like my golden retriever when she wants to make friends. She tilts her head, but in my case, it means I can't read. Anyway, and you look at the applications that are out there. Some are going to come from Verizon. Some are going to come from people who are working out there, and some's going to come from the World Wide Web to provide it to develop new applications. And the expectations of the network, whether you're talking ours or any of these fellows, those expectations are expanding exponentially at this point. So you're really looking at, to drive this network, you're looking for new revenue sources, and they've got to come in a hurry. You're looking for service velocity. You need faster service innovation to support what you're doing. Kind of like this morning when I asked about, you can develop a thing, but we never quite have enough content to go on the thing. Well, you've got to develop a lot of things really fast, and then you've got to come up with the ways they're going to be used and service those customers and what their needs are. And then finally, and I see this when I get involved with our wireless RCN study, the little bit that I do with that, there's a tremendous growth in the amount of gigabytes that you're trying to drive, and that pushes your costs up to do that, but your cost per gigabit goes down. So what you're looking to do is you're looking to do better, you're looking to do faster, and you're looking to do cheaper. And you don't get to pick 2 or 3 or the one you like best. You have to do all 3, and you have to do them better than everyone else, okay? I'm a really attractive guy. No, I'm a really attractive guy, okay? Never mind that I look a little like Jared. Anyway, redesign networks to make them intelligent and orchestrated and enable agility and automation, okay? So when we look at this, we have to rethink the edge because this gets to efficiency. Back to the point about the vehicles going down the road at 70 miles an hour, you've got to have less than 10 millisecond round trip latency. Okay, any delays at all are catastrophic with a lot of the stuff you're going to do in 5G. You have to have persistent and secure coverage, so there can't be inconsistencies or dead spots in the network or places where the latency is a great deal slower or faster. It has to be consistent, and you have to have gigabit bandwidth at all the edges. And network enabling, obviously you're trying to enable things like autonomous vehicles and drones, edge caching and optimization, virtual and augmented intelligence, and high bandwidth processing and real-time decisions. So if 5G is really going to function to where people say it's going, this is instantaneous stuff. And I think the point was made this morning, if it takes a little while to get on Google and get your answer, and it's not exactly as fast as you get it when you're on the Fios network, that's okay. But if you're talking about a thing that's moving and can kill other people, be it a train, be it a street light that's being controlled by the system, be it a bus with people on it, or that beer truck. If you don't have instantaneous, dependable service everywhere, then it don't work. So as 5G is defined, the building blocks are already there, and some of them are occurring. There's multiple new technologies being developed, and the building blocks involve density, LTE advanced, C-RAN virtualization, and LTE-U and LA. I have no idea what the heck that is. I wrote it down at lunchtime. But anyway, I'm sure you guys know what it is. So now is a really good time to be excited about what's next. I think what our stock did in the last 3 or 4 days, I wonder if Mike would have had that slide, but I'm not sure. He wrote this a while ago. It is a really good time to be excited these days. When you look at the wide range of use cases at Verizon,
I'm very excited, by the way.
you are, and you're the guy. He texts me bad news about Verizon, which I find, I actually like the guy. You know, I go all the way out to Seattle to see Dave Matthews at the Gorge this summer, and Mike says, you know, make sure you reach out to him because he's going to help you and he'll tell you where to go. And maybe you can get a free meal at his house. He took his family and went on his vacation to avoid the inevitability of me reaching out to him, didn't you?
I did.
And then he waited till after he got back to say, well, I wasn't home, that's why I didn't respond to your damn emails. Anyway, wide range of use cases. When you look at this little half moon here, and you look at the inside, the 4G environment was really tablets, cell phones, and cars. When you look at the 5G environment, there's a heck of a lot more devices and a heck of a lot more environments and a heck of a lot more things there that, again, get back to this question of reliability, security, and latency. The battery life of 10 years, machine-to-machine communication at an ultra-low cost. There are predicted to be 10 to 100 times, they're talking in billions of more devices that will be there in a 5G and 6G world that will be talking to one another than we have today. Think about that growth. That's how you get into that, what was it, 210 billion did you have up there? Some crazy number anyway. But that kind of growth comes from expanding the services and finding new ways to serve people. That's where that revenue has to come from, and it has to happen in a hurry. Obviously, your gigabit data rates have to exceed at least 100 megabits per second whenever they're needed. They expect there to be 10,000 times more traffic in the wireless world. Think about that. Think about where we were 5 or 6 years ago, and think about 10,000 times more traffic than there is today. Amazing, right? Ultra reliability and very low latency. I read pretty well, don't I? Except when I cock my head. Anyway, there are all these partners that we have that are out there, and they're all the names that you'd expect to find, and they're working on things like the chipsets, the devices, the network itself, and then the services that will be provided in this network. There's this open trial specification alliance out there that's coming together, and we seem to get along like Republicans and Democrats, but trying to reach a common agreement on what the 5G specs will be across the industry so that you don't get conflicts, because again, remember, latency, reliability, if you have handoffs, it's all got to work together. It don't work at all. You have an open, inclusive, and collaborative approach, which is what I guess I'm saying. You drive and shape vendor adoption, accelerate commercial solutions, and everything is based on use case development and valuation. So Verizon's focused on 5 things. In Mike's presentation, I think we're focused on a lot more than 5. But in this instance, we're focused on technology partners and development plans. We're focused on spectrum policy and framework. Because remember, 5G is in its infancy, right? We're not there yet in a long, well, even though we are here in AT&T, I guess, right? Technology field trials, advanced 5G standards and process, and then you need to mobilize the entire ecosystem. So technology of the future is here. That must have been the AT&T. The ecosystem is definitely being primed to make it successful. The opportunity is right now and action is needed. So we champion the resources. Let's get after it. Now, he probably had thank you at this point, but I decided, hey, I might as well put a little effort in making this presentation, so I'll add 2 slides. So my points are, there's just a little bit to think about here, whether you're talking about wireline or wireless trends. First of all, they're not mutually exclusive. Broadband technology is critical to remaining a viable leader in the telecommunications industry. okay? Whether you're talking wireless or you're talking the fiber that's out there, or you're talking even HSI DSL cable. Rapid network transformation is critical to making the transition in this broadband 5G world. Migration's driven by the same things Larry talked about when I started coming here 10, 12 years ago. Really, it's customers and what they're demanding. It's regulation or deregulation and how that's behaving, and in everything there's competition. The timing and technology transition is and will remain, for all these companies, a function of the business cost benefit analysis that gets done by the financial types. Broadband expansion is at a hypercritical point in the history of the telecommunications industry. At a point at this point where never has it been more important, because you can't get to 5G without making the investment and expanding the broadband portions of this and how you get that broadband. The transition of the wireless industry to the 5G platform is rapidly escalating the need and the demand for fiber. The next 10 years, ties right into Ian's, and I didn't write it after I saw it, okay, will be a period of historic transformation to a broadband and wireless world. Expect an explosion of mergers and acquisitions. Expect a lot of volatility in the industry, both in terms of the stock prices and in terms of the competition and the pricing out there to our customers. Expect a lot of industry consolidation. 4 of us, but only 1 landline company, Gary? I don't want to be the one. No. CapEx investment will explode. Okay, so you're going to spend a lot of money. And how many assessors in the room? And if you're a state guy, you can still call yourself an assessor. I was there for 15 years. I still do that, even though there's only 1 assessor in every town. You know, you guys capture the CapEx really well. And I don't mean that as a shot, but we report the CapEx pretty well, you hope, right? You hope your compliance team's doing their job. And you see that, and I got to tell you, my experience whenever I report CapEx, the assessor captures that extremely well, and they make assumptions about you spend money, and you're spending money and it makes a profit. And you're spending a lot of money on fiber, and you're spending a lot of money on your wireless network, and that means you're making a lot of money. Well, the other part of it is device connectivity, okay? And that was the thing about 10,000 more, you know, the amount of demand on the network will be 10,000 greater than it is today, and there'll be billions more devices. So where am I going with this craziness? Expect differences between landline and wireless, telco and cable TV to become virtually indiscernible. We're in the same business, it is the same business, and we're all players in that business, and that's why you see the acquisitions you see in the interim to get where we're going. Expect competition to be intense, it already is, both inside and outside the ILEC territories that we serve and the other ILEC serves, across both the nation and in some cases, or all cases, the world. Expect urban, densely populated areas to experience the transition first, and then the rest will follow. And again, that's back to a cost-benefit analysis and a business case to justify the CapEx. Current political climate, and I mean that much more broadly than I did this morning, will play a critical role in facilitating rapid infrastructure changes. Maybe, and maybe not. Depends what we tweet at 3 in the morning, how people react. Vision requires leveraging the assets that we currently have, and it certainly makes a key investment, a very substantial investment in the CapEx that you need that we don't have. So from a wireless assessment, valuation, logical context, okay, because I'm an appraiser, that's what I do. I may not know this business, that's why I reached out to someone who did, okay? Wireline and wireless trends are not completely mutually exclusive, I said that. Last night at dinner, a guy who I used to work with, a couple guys, Charlie and Bob Geringer were sitting with me at dinner, and we start talking about time value money. You know, I'm thinking far down the road, Cedar Street Courtyard, but we're talking time value money. Ian's chart drove home the time value money story vividly, okay? Over the next 10 years, he was showing growth to numbers that look like between 210 billion to 250 billion, whether you're dealing pure with mobile or you're doing with fixed, all right? But that's a time value of money. Those cash flows are where? They begin about in year 5, and they explode where in about year 10. Well, you're going to take an awful lot of risk, so the discount rate has to be fairly high. You're going to wait somewhere between 5, 6, and really 10 years to get that revenue stream that looks so darn great for all the CapEx money that you're spending when? Today and for the next 5 to 10 years, but 70% of that CapEx will happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So you're taking present value money and spending 70% of it in the next 3 to 5 years for monies that you may or may not gather to the numbers you're forecasting about 10 years out. And if you do the discount, and if you look at the simple risk related to that, you have a fairly high discount rate and you have a fairly discounted $250 to $210 billion worth of revenue stream. So when I look at that, I then begin to think about how much CapEx to generate that. And I forgot what Ian's number was. Wasn't it like 110 billion? But remember, those are $110 billion spent mostly in the next 3 to 5 years, current to then. So those dollars are a lot closer, and when you do your discounting, even a dumb guy like me knows that the percentage to present worth of a dollar closer to you is a lot more than further away. And the risk of getting it or spending it is a lot less than the risk of actually making it. So CapEx cost investment does not equal value to my assessing friend. I was in New York State, so we're never as good as California, but we always pretended to be. CapEx cost investment does not equal value, at least not immediately, and possibly never, because I need to emphasize the risk. Remember, we talked about Moore's Law this morning. Okay, bandwidth exploding every year and a half. Well, you think about the telecommunications business and the kind of change that's occurred since the Telecom Act of 1996. Think about when wireless devices passed landline subscribers. That took about 8 or 9 years to happen in the life of the wireless business, and it happened in 2002. Think about all the generations of wireless and where we're going next to 5G. And there's tremendous risk if you're waiting 10 years for something in an industry that doubles its demands every year and a half, and that there's always something new coming down the road. That's a pretty scary risk, okay? Transitioning technology always leads to redundancy and overbuilt duplicative network elements. I wouldn't be a good property tax manager if I didn't whine about obsolescence and redundancy. So migration is driven by consumer demand for access, competition, and deregulation. Remember that from last slide? I do. Timing and technology transition is a function of the business cost analysis and risk. The next 10 years will be periodic transformation to broadband wireless from the last slide. The explosion of competition. Expect differences. It's going to be so blurred we won't know the difference. Expect intense competition. We haven't begun to fight over Jared, but we're already battling for the can you hear me now guy. All right, and we're already worried about fees or fleas or whatever it is we have, okay? But that's a lot of competition. And in an appraiser's world, that competition is either healthy competition or it's ruinous competition. It's appraisal terminology, I'm flashing it. Gary, when he said there's only gonna be one telecom guy, I got a little more nervous than I was yesterday, all right? But hey, I can only hope that Gary has going to enjoy his retirement. Anyway, that's it. Expect urban, densely populated areas to get things before rural areas, and that'll cause what? Political firestorm, right? It always does, because we don't have to deal in reality there. We can deal in the reality that everybody should get everything at the same time, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense from an investment standpoint. Current political climate must play a critical role in rapidly facilitating infrastructure changes. So all these items listed in black brings me home to this point. In addition to using discounted cash flow thinking and the present value of one, you need to focus on all this CapEx investment doesn't mean all this CapEx generated profit overnight. And I think if you think about this, in addition to that DCF model, there's typical physical deterioration, and obviously that isn't the main player here. That's just normal wear and tear on a network, all right? But there sure as heck is functional obsolescence. And the appraisal theory behind functional obsolescence is it comes in 3 types. It's both curable and incurable, but you have deficiency in your network, that you have to overcome. You have a need for modernization, and you have super adequacy. And then, of course, there's the thing that I think impacts this business maybe greater than anything else, and that'd be economic obsolescence, because you're looking at 4 people here who want to be survivors. You're looking at 4 companies that want to be survivors. And when a guy like Moffett or someone else puts out their analyst report and it's not glowing on your company, you see that your stock price the day before Trump was elected president, President Trump was elected, your stock price from then till 3 days ago had gone up faster almost than any other sector that you could invest in. And in the last 3 days, your stock price has gone down enough that you've given back all that and a little bit more. And that to me is risk. It's a hyper level of risk. It's a beta, I think, that is enormous. And I think all that and everything I'm talking about here affects value. And you can't just focus on CapEx and go, there's no obsolescence in fiber. There's no obsolescence in the wireless market. There sure as heck is, because you got redundant networks. These guys are talking about 2G, 4G. Steve doesn't even know what he's got, but he's calling it, right? I mean, the 2G or 4G or whatever you're getting rid of that you didn't get rid of, you got fees. No, you don't. We do. I'm sorry. But when I look at this thing, okay, you got ruinous competition. I think you have, and you've had for a long time, and hopefully President Trump alleviates a lot of this and helps all the industries. You have regulatory obstruction and you have lag. And when you look at the combination of those two things, you sure as heck have economic obsolescence on an industry at a time when we have to completely reinvent the industry for 5G and beyond. And it's either temporary or it can be permanent economic obsolescence. But if it's permanent, you have one less telecommunications company than you had when you have those players in the industry. So with that said, as usual, whether I know anything or not, I talk more than anyone else. Whether I say anything, you know, I used to manage a big group at the state of New York, and I walk into my first meeting of a guy they downsized, and I walk in with a pile of paper because I'm taking over an ag program in addition to everything else, and the guy was very bitter because he was a political placement. Mark Twentyman is his name. I shouldn't put that out there, but he's retired. He's happy somewhere, right? Cornell grad, knows way more about ag than me. Grew up on a farm. I grew up in Shameless. And I walk in a meeting for all my own guys and him and his team, and I now have a staff of about 31 people. And Mark looks at me, and I'm very proud of myself because I've taken over, and he hates me because they downsized him and put him in my group. And Mark says, you know, you can always tell the guy who knows the least because he carries the most to the meeting. And I realized that I was going to have a lot of fun managing Mark. So I talked up to my normal potential at least. So I'm sorry, guys. Go ahead. That's it. That's all I got, and all Mike Abner and add.
Thank you, guys.